Welcome to DD History, where we bring the past to life with stories that shaped our world. Today, we're blasting off into one of the most exciting chapters of the Cold War, the space race. Picture it, the late 1950s. The United States and the Soviet Union weren't just rivals on Earth, they were competing in the skies above. This wasn't just about rockets and satellites, it was about pride, power, and proving which system, democracy or communism, was the future of humanity. In 1957, the Soviets stunned the world by launching Sputnik, the very first artificial satellite. Suddenly, a shiny little metal ball circling the Earth at thousands of miles per hour made Americans look up at the night sky with a mix of awe and fear. If the Soviets could launch a satellite, what else could they launch? Missiles, space stations, alien invasions? Okay, maybe not aliens, but the pressure was on. From that moment, the race to space was more than just science. It was about national security, global prestige, and inspiring people back home. Schools rushed to improve math and science education, engineers worked around the clock, and presidents made bold promises. And at the finish line, the moon. That distant, glowing beacon became the ultimate prize. Winning there wasn't just about beating the Soviets, it was about proving that humanity could dream bigger, climb higher, and actually leave our planet behind. So buckle up, because the space race was one of the most thrilling rivalries in history, and it ends with one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. When the Soviet Union launched Sputnik in October 1957, the world changed overnight. Imagine standing in your backyard, looking up at the stars, and realizing one of those little dots moving across the sky wasn't a star at all. It was a Soviet satellite. Americans felt two things at once, amazement and dread. On the one hand, the future had arrived. On the other, the future might belong to the Soviets. The Cold War was already tense, with both superpowers building nuclear weapons and competing for global influence. But now, the Soviet Union had proven they could build a rocket strong enough to leave Earth. If that rocket could carry Sputnik, could it also carry a nuclear warhead across the ocean? That question kept a lot of Americans awake at night. The US scrambled to catch up. In December 1957, the Navy tried to launch Vanguard, America's first attempt at a satellite. The result? A spectacular flop. The rocket barely made it off the pad before exploding into a ball of fire. Soviet newspapers mocked it as the Kaputnik, not exactly the strong showing America wanted. But the US wasn't down for long. In January 1958, Explorer 1 became the first successful American satellite, and it even discovered something remarkable: the Van Allen radiation belts, invisible zones of charged particles surrounding the Earth. Science was on the scoreboard at last. Still, the Soviets kept pressing ahead. In 1961, they stunned the world again with a jaw-dropping achievement, sending the first human into space. Yuri Gagarin, just 27 years old, climbed into a spacecraft named Vostok 1 and orbited Earth once in 108 minutes. When he landed, he instantly became a global hero. The Soviet Union had proven it could put a person in space and bring them back alive. For Americans, this was a gut punch. The US had brave test pilots and astronauts in training, but none had made it into orbit yet. The pressure was building. The US had to prove not only that it could keep up, but that it could win. And that's when President John F. Kennedy stepped into the story. In 1961, after Gagarin's flight, Kennedy went before Congress and declared that the United States would put a man on the moon before the decade was out. This wasn't just a bold goal, it was a nearly impossible one. At the time, NASA had only managed a 15-minute suborbital flight with Alan Shepard. The idea of landing on the moon sounded like trying to leap from riding a tricycle to driving a Ferrari overnight. But Kennedy understood that this wasn't just about rockets. It was about vision, leadership, and national pride. If America could do this, it would prove that democracy, innovation, and teamwork could outpace Soviet engineering. The space race had its finish line, and it was no longer just about orbits or satellites. It was about who could get to the moon first. And the world was watching. But hold on, before we launch ourselves any further into rockets, astronauts, and moon missions, I've got a little mission for you. If you're enjoying this journey through history, make sure to hit that like button. Think of it as fueling up the rocket so we can keep going. And if you subscribe, well, that's basically strapping yourself into the crew capsule. You'll be right here with us for every launch, crash, and moon landing ahead. And to those of you who already subscribed, thank you. You're basically the Houston Mission Control of this channel. Couldn't do this without you. All right, countdown complete. 3, 2, 1, back to history. So back to the action. By the early 1960s, the United States had officially entered the space race, but let's be real, they were running behind. The Soviets had already launched Sputnik, scared the socks off everybody, and then, in 1961, they sent Yuri Gagarin into orbit, first human in space, one complete lap around the Earth. That's the kind of thing you don't just clap politely for. You panic, then start writing checks to NASA. America scrambled to catch up, launching the Mercury program. These missions were basically, let's see if we can strap a person to a rocket without them turning into toast. The Mercury astronauts, known as the Mercury 7, became national heroes. Names like John Glenn, Alan Shepard, and Gus Grissom. They were test pilots turned celebrities, paraded around as living symbols that America wasn't falling completely behind. Alan Shepard became the first American in space in 1961, though it was just a quick up-and-down flight. Then John Glenn orbited the Earth in 1962, finally putting America on the same playing field as the Soviets. Crowds went wild. Kids in schools cheered. Suddenly, space wasn't just science. It was a symbol of freedom, democracy, and Go Team USA. But here's the kicker. While the US was celebrating, the Soviets just kept upping the stakes. They put the first woman in space, Valentina Tereshkova, in 1963. They launched longer missions, spacewalks, and kept proving they were one step ahead. Every time NASA checked a box, the Soviets already had 3 boxes filled out and highlighted in red. Enter the Gemini program, the US stepping up its training game. Gemini wasn't just about putting people in space, it was about teaching astronauts how to live there. Longer missions, spacewalks, practicing docking 2 spacecraft together in orbit, skills they would need for the big prize, landing on the moon. And the Gemini missions were tough. Astronauts cramped inside tiny capsules. Seriously, these things were smaller than most cars, floating around Earth for up to 2 weeks. Imagine sharing a small closet with another person while eating toothpaste-like food, trying not to bump elbows every 5 seconds. That's basically Gemini. But it worked. By the mid-1960s, NASA had checked off every skill necessary for a moon landing. Meanwhile, the political stakes kept getting higher. This wasn't just about bragging rights anymore. It was about the Cold War. Space had become a stage where democracy and communism battled it out without firing a single shot. Every launch, every mission, every astronaut stepping into a capsule, it was all a statement to the world. Whose system was stronger? Who would lead humanity into the future? President John F. Kennedy had already raised the bar in 1961 with his famous challenge, put a man on the moon before the decade is out. It was bold, almost reckless, considering America hadn't even figured out how to spend more than a few hours in orbit. But Kennedy knew this was about more than science. It was about inspiring people, showing strength, and proving America could achieve the impossible. By the late 1960s, the US had the momentum. The Gemini missions had set the stage. The next program, Apollo, was designed for one thing only: the moon. But before the dream came true, tragedy struck. In 1967, during a pre-launch test for Apollo 1, a fire broke out inside the command module. Astronauts Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee were killed. It was devastating, a reminder that space exploration wasn't just daring, it was deadly. The whole nation mourned, and the Apollo program paused to rebuild. But NASA didn't give up. They redesigned, re-engineered, and came back stronger. By the late 60s, the US was finally closing in on the Soviets. The missions that followed, Apollo 7, Apollo 8, Apollo 10, were like rehearsals for the greatest show on Earth, or rather, off Earth. Apollo 8 even orbited the Moon in 1968, sending back that iconic Earthrise photo, a blue planet rising above the lunar surface, a picture that changed how humanity saw itself forever. The stage was set, the US was ready for the moonshot, and the world was watching. July 16, 1969. The world held its breath. Apollo 11, the mission that had been a decade in the making, was ready to launch. Astronauts Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins climbed aboard the Saturn IV rocket at over 363 feet, the most powerful rocket ever built. Millions watched on television, glued to screens as America's moonshot thundered into the sky. Liftoff wasn't just a technical feat, it was a statement. The United States was taking the lead in the space race, and it wasn't taking prisoners. After 3 days of travel, the spacecraft approached the Moon. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin transferred into the lunar module, nicknamed Eagle, while Michael Collins orbited above in the command module, faithfully waiting like a loyal space chauffeur. Then came the moment that would be etched into history. On July 20, 1969, the Eagle touched down in the Sea of Tranquility. Armstrong's voice, calm yet electrifying, crackled over the radio. "Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed." And then, the words everyone remembers, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Armstrong became the first human to walk on the Moon. Buzz Aldrin soon followed, describing the lunar surface as magnificent desolation while planting the American flag. The astronauts collected rocks, took photographs, and left behind instruments that would send scientific data back to Earth for years. But here's the kicker. This wasn't just a victory for the US. It was a victory for humanity. People around the globe watched in awe. Streets filled with cheering crowds from London to Tokyo, from Rio to New Delhi. The moon landing was proof that humans could do the impossible, that technology and teamwork could conquer a world beyond our own. For a brief, shining moment, Cold War tensions took a back seat to shared wonder. It didn't matter which country you were from, you couldn't help but marvel at the fact that humans had left their footprints on another world. Apollo 11 also changed the way we saw ourselves. For the first time, Earth appeared as a fragile blue marble hanging in the blackness of space. That perspective would inspire generations of scientists, engineers, and dreamers. It spurred new research, new technologies, and even new philosophies about our responsibility to our planet. The moon landing became a symbol. If we could reach the moon, what else could we do? Cure diseases? Explore Mars? Maybe even figure out why socks always disappear in the laundry? Of course, the space race didn't end with Apollo 11, but the moon landing achieved what years of competition, tension, and ambition had been building toward, a triumph that transcended politics. It proved that human curiosity, courage, and collaboration could reach beyond borders and even beyond Earth. So next time you look up at a bright round moon in the night sky, remember, that glowing rock isn't just a satellite orbiting our planet. It's a reminder of one of humanity's boldest achievements, a moment when we all took a giant leap together. And that, my friends, is why Apollo 11 still matters, 50 years later. From Earth to the moon and back, history isn't just about the past. It's about the leaps we take, the dreams we chase, and the stories that remind us how far we can go. Welcome to DD History. Let's keep exploring together.